Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is Hometown Heroes. It is Monday. Can you all hear me okay? Can you hear me? Am I having glitches again?
Well, I'm having a little bit of challenge. I'm getting a lot of feedback squawk noise, Mary. But we're on the call.
All right. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to switch devices here, so just give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
All righty, no problem. We'll stay where we're at.
All right. Is this better?
Yes, it is. Very clear.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that. I had to adjust
Sometimes
locations.
technical glitches just happen.
They do. So, it is Monday, and as we wait for our guests to show up, it is the start
I'm your guest.
of, yes, it is the start of Patriotic Week, to honor Patriotic Day, or also known as 9/11. All week we'll be hosting shows throughout the week, and all of our regular programming will be adjusted to honor and remember the events that happened that fateful day. We're not here to talk about conspiracies and whose fault it is and how it happened, all that fun stuff. We're here to honor those who sacrificed it all. We're also here to remember what happened, but also to get that feeling back. The whole goal of these shows, is remember, yes, this happened, but it also did one thing. It united a country. It united people no matter what race, creed, religion, social status you were.
Well, Mary, as the president of the Hope Collection, I'd like to first of all let everybody know that's listening in not only today's show, but every show, that your fingerprints are all over every one of our productions. Not only that is your spirit and your heart. And I'd like to commend you because you were there. You weren't there as a bystander or a pedestrian. You were there as one of the rescuers, and you're part of the recovery mode, which was the hardest thing that I can think happened, next to sitting on a bridge and watching the plane go through Tower 2, as I was that day. And you passed right by where I was staying in the hotel, because you can only get to there and go down to rescue and recover those folks, of 3,000 that we lost that day. You were hands-on, and hearts on, and question how it affected you, affected so many people's lives. Well, the fact that I know you personally, and I can talk about what you've done, that is such a tribute. Like you said, there's a tribute this week to know that we're going forward, moving on. The principles of Americanism and the idea of serving and the idea of helping to make this a better world, you exemplify that to the highest level there can be. No greater love is there than someone who would lay down their life for somebody else. You have done that. And so we do salute you and honor you as a person of importance that on 9/11 you helped make a difference. And we want to thank you. And I want to thank you as the president of the Hope Collection.
You know, honestly, everyone else that had to witness it, what they went through was harder. You know, not being able to do anything and just stand there helplessly watching it is 10 times worse than being able to have the opportunity to do something, to be proactive. And that's where a lot of military, I have a friend who was actually in the Coast Guard and still is. He's retiring in a couple of years, but he was out in the harbor that day. And his job was literally to stand there armed and ready to go in case something happened. But they had to stand there behind and helplessly watch. They couldn't do anything. And with the rise of, you know, all these school shootings and all this stuff going on in our society and all this violence, and my goal this week is to talk about resolutions and ways that we need to be more involved in one society to how we talk to each other. You know, we're in this society now where we look through a lens on a camera and we lose humanity. People spend more time recording events as they happen instead of actually getting involved. You know, parents are reaching out for help and it falls on deaf ears. It's like, as a society, instead of being proactive and fixing situations, it's wait till something happens and then deal with the aftermath. And we need to change all that. We need to be more involved and be more. I love my phone. I love him. Sorry, I got a little interruption by Princess. It's all about taking those steps. You know, it's like the homeless veterans crisis, and we talk about it to an exhausting end. But when you see a person who's homeless, you automatically go to two different options. One, drug addiction, and two, alcohol. Figuring out and finding out ways to help them, you're automatically judging someone based on the way they look. You know, and this happened a lot on 9/11, and how even though all the terrorists were dressed like Easterners, or Westerners, I'm sorry, in just suits and ties and regular clothes, we automatically went into this discrimination field of every Muslim of Middle Eastern descent that were in traditional clothes, they were stopped and frisked. And they were harassed because of what they look like. And so this week it's all about acceptance. It's all about adjusting. It's all about remembering. Ron, you have a horrible background noise at the moment. And so I'm going to open up the lines for individuals who would like to introduce themselves and say anything that comes to mind, honestly.
I usually talk too much, Mary, but before I start commending you, I just want to hear your voice talk a little bit more, because the things that we've been through in the country, they call them tests. Ammonia, it was just a test of courage, a test of heart, a test of being able to see that something in life is bigger. than you. So I want to applaud you, but before I applaud you, if you would, Mary, just whatever your heart is telling you to say, because you've been standing back shining the spotlight on people for years, and ever since I've known you, and when you came in, you shined your light so bright and started growing the Hope Foundation and grew us to all these different countries. And click on this button and you can listen to us in another language. So whatever your heart is saying, Mary, let me just push the pause button right there and let us give you and let you give yourself a few more moments. And if you're there and if ain't nobody there, just high five yourself. Or go to the mirror and say you're a bad to the bone kind of girlfriend, a mom, a teacher, a mentor, a network guru, and just a real down-to-heart people person. So I'm going to say some more, but don't let me snatch the mic so quickly, Mary. Tell us more. I know that some of the things, just like Ron did me, he didn't throw me under the bus. He threw me under the spotlight and said, we heard about some of the things that you've done. I was reading in the Word, it says, I may have done what they said I did, but that's not really who I am. Mary, if you don't mind sharing a little bit more about you, can you tell us who Mary Stanley is, Speedy? And if you don't mind, please, ma'am.
Well, I ran through it. It was pretty stormy.
Should we start with the simple phrase that I am your best friend or the biggest pain in the ass? Depends on how you want to look at it. But I come with the disclaimer. I'm German, Irish, ex-military. So a lot of times my filter gets broken. And so sometimes it's hard for me to say the appropriate things or the nice things, especially when I see a world of individuals being discriminated against because of a label. I'm just going to put it that way. You know, I started out joining the military at 17 because it was the only way I was going to get out of where I was. You know, bad home life as a kid, but also not having money for college. And so I got my dream job right out of the military. A good gentleman retired right before I signed my papers, so I got to sign up for search and rescue aviation. And so then I was in the National Guard, not in full-time Army, because you can't join full-time Army while you're still in high school. I was dating a guy out of New York at the time. He was from Syracuse during 9/11, and we were out there visiting friends who happened to be, I went to boot camp with and was stationed out there. And they got activated, and I volunteered to go with. And so I was part of the recovery and working at Ground Zero, and I met a lot of phenomenal people to this day I still talk to. And at the same time, the first time I got to meet our former President Trump. Like him, hate him, he is unfiltered. But the one thing I will say about this man is that he does so much charity work that no one ever knows about. He doesn't throw everything on the front page of what he does. But yes, there are a lot of times that he speaks before he thinks and reacts before when he should be proactive, but that's how people are. You know, I deployed a few times, and I don't talk a lot about my military past simply because I have two little ones that are special, that don't understand everything, and so they ask a lot of questions that I'm not ready to answer to them. And so for me, it's easier to wait till they're old enough to overhear a conversation because, you know, kids, they have ears everywhere. But I got to do a lot of cool things while I was in the military. You know, there's a program called the Adopt a Soldier program that was created down in San Antonio, Texas at Fort Sam. and I was a big part of that program, and it was designed for kids and by kids I mean young adults joining boot camp and having nowhere to go on the holidays. And it was created for individuals that had nowhere to go, and having the community adopt one of these individuals for the holiday season, and they'd have a place to go. So they were with a family that was safe, thoroughly vetted, instead of being alone, locked up in barracks. My kids came along, and they were gifted and had some issues and ended up being diagnosed with autism, different variations of it. And ever since then, I've learned how society sucks when it comes to these children, and how it's the biggest kept secret in the world. And this is where I have a big issue with the governor of Minnesota, where I live, becoming a vice president. Is it is not common knowledge, but his son is on the spectrum. He is neurodiverse. He has nonverbal disorder and is on the spectrum. But instead of embracing it and using his power as governor to help change regulations, make things better for the people, he chooses to basically hide behind it and pretend it doesn't exist. And I've spent my retirement age, getting out of the military, to become an advocate for the world of autism and neurodiversity, and helping change the way things are done, so that these kids, instead of being looked at like a hindrance or a problem that needs to be fixed, allowing them to meet in the middle. Let them develop a personality. First and foremost, letting them be a kid. In our society, we are so focused on them becoming adults at such a young age that the things that, such as imagination play, and is a huge step in growing up. It's playing house, things like that, teach problem-solving techniques, but it also helps them understand the world they live in. They mimic what they see. When kids play house, they're watching mom and dad, and they're doing what mom and dad does. And they also develop that empathy and that nurturing part of their brain. Imagination is the gateway to problem solving, and helps them think for themselves and helps them adjust into society without having to have someone tell them every step of the way what to do and how to do it. And in the world of autism, that is not something that is promoted, encouraged, or dealt, even acknowledged. And it's all about them not being an embarrassment. And this is one thing I tell all parents, is that all children, label or non-label, are going to embarrass you. It's their right. It's what happens when you have kids. Kids are unfiltered. That filter don't develop till many years later. And some people never develop the filter, period. And so the little things that they do automatically to make themselves comfortable in their environment are now becoming brought to the attention, so that they're more subconscious about it and self-aware, and then they start to feel, ways to hide it and bury it. And when that happens, that actually affects their mental health on top of it all. The one thing we talk a lot about in society in general is the suicide rate in veterans. On average, 27 veterans commit suicide a day. The one statistic that's a lot higher that we don't ever talk about is the autism suicide rate. So out of young adults on the spectrum, 66% of those will have suicidal thoughts and depression and anxiety that have nothing to do with the label at all. Out of that 66%, 25 of them between the ages of 10 and 16 will have committed suicide. To them, feeling unsafe, unsupported, not understood, and bullied. And as a society, we need to talk about this. As a society, we need to do something about it. We need to change. And we need to acknowledge that they feel things, they understand things, they do things just like everybody else. And we need to stop looking at them like, okay, you're autistic, you're just understanding things wrong. Instead, we need to acknowledge you're upset. Okay, why are you upset? Now, what do we need to do to fix this so that you feel better? And that's where I'm at right now. And coming up, October 1st is we're going to start the first of its kind anywhere in the world. And we will be having a series of radio shows coming up for neurodiversity by neurodiverse. So these are people that are on the spectrum. They've got forms of autism. They have ADHD. They have ADD. They have brain injuries, trauma, post-war syndrome. This will be designed for anyone who needs help to be able to get resources from people who live that world, including myself, but also in teenagers to understand when you're going through those rough periods of time, there is somebody that's been through it, that have come out on top. You're not alone, and it'll give them resources to reach out and talk to people who are in that world that understand it. In the first person world, not just reading a book and saying, I understand what you're going through, even though you don't. So I'm going to open up the phone lines, and let's see if anyone has anything to say.
Back to Country Boy. He's always got something to say. But, Mary, the things that you was talking about just now, I heard my grandmama's spirit. In the country, they call you old school because you cannot do what you have not been taught. Somebody showed you how to walk and talk and do all those kind of things. And then right in the middle of you talking, the scripture says, ye without sin cast the first stone. But if the truth was really told, everybody has what they call a handicap. I call them handy-capable, because there's something that you can do that can nobody else on the planet do like you do when you do what you do. But there's certain gifts, certain things can be learned and certain things can be taught, and they can't understand. People don't like stuff that they don't understand. And when they had to come up with a label and call it autism, they had to call it something because it was beyond their comprehension. They couldn't figure it out. Well, God says he's doing a new thing, and he's going to use the children to confound the wise. And just because we don't understand them, I could listen to you talk about it forever, Mary, because the Spirit says that it's not working. I have never, ever, ever called anybody stupid. I kind of felt like it one time. But if you look in Webster Dictionary, the definition of stupidity is to do something over and over again, and it's not working, you still do it the same way. I'm not calling the school stupid, but they continue to do the same stuff over and over and over again. And I was reading in the Word, they said if somebody like you, like me, like Rick, like Ron, like Lynn, that sees something that's not right or not just, let the redeemed of the Lord say something. Mary, sweetie, I can't thank you enough. I guess I'm just have to hug you through the airways about your courage, your spirit, your being a better world changer. Mary, keep up what you're doing, sweetie, because if somebody doesn't do it, and I'll pass the mic, I just borrow this from Marvin Gaye. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. We got to change the world, starting with you, Mary, and starting with me. I'm gonna pass the mic.
Does anyone else?
This is Charlie Hughes. I am, I guess, an infrequent listener to the station, but I am a friend of Cowboys and Country Boy. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about my other partner. But anyway, I'm a friend of his, and he and I have had several conversations recently. But when I was listening to you, and then I was listening to some of the things that Country Boy said, we all have three very distinct things that separates us from everybody else on the planet, and those things are, we got our own individual thumbprint. We all know about that one. We got our own individual scent. Remember back in the days when you watched the movies and they would give the bloodhounds the scent of a would-be robber or somebody that did something and they had to run them down? Because nobody have your scent and no one has your thumbprint. Well, there's another...
Except for if you're identical twins. They have found that identical twins have the same fingerprints. And they found this out because one actually did it, the other one didn't.
Wow, that is interesting. I would like to look up a little bit more on that. That is very interesting. And thank you for sharing that.
Thank you,
The other thing that we also have that is unique to each individual is their personality pattern. We all got people that might act a little bit alike. You act just like your mom, you act just like your dad, your brother, your sister, whatever. But nobody have the exact same personality pattern. And my question to you, Mary, is dealing with, kids with autism, have you been able to identify their personality? Do they, like you got a personality, I have a personality, and I teach personalities, for example. This, people that are dominant, direct. I, people that are impressive, influential. S, slow, steady, secure conscience. C, perfectionist, conscientious people. Have you been able to notice anything about their personality that just basically stands out?
One of the big things and the biggest misconception is when these kids are allowed to just be. They've found that kids that are going through all these therapies that are just given, modifications and for the most part leading a normal childhood, they are really funny. They're extremely sarcastic. My son, for example, is another one of these that's very sarcastic, very quick wit. What I have found a lot of times is the way that their brains are wired and thinking is very parallel to a veteran or a military personnel and how they think, with the dry, twisted sense of humor, but also just how they process things. They're always in this constant state of aware. And so they're always observing everything around them. But the other coolest thing I've noticed with these kids is that if there's a loophole in the system, and if they're given that environment to be able to speak out, they will utilize those loopholes to every extent of their being. A good example is, a lot of nonverbals stay nonverbal because, one, they don't have to. They know that speech teachers, even though they're supposed to be teaching you and helping you talk, do not handle silence very well. And they know that if you sit there and stare at them long enough, they're going to talk for you. What's the point of talking? The same with parents. Parents talk for them. I used to be guilty of this. And like communication cards and tools we give them, a lot of times it ends up being more of a crutch. And they utilize that because you say things like use your words, and they'll just keep pointing at words on the screen and not talk because why should we have to? I'm technically using my words. And that's where wording is so important, and why I say these kids are so, so smart. Even though they may test low on the IQ scale, they are very, very smart. And they know how to manipulate the system. But we don't give them credit for it. We look down at them as being dumb. A lot of these kids are very when they know they're around someone who cares, because they have the ability to read you. Give them 2 minutes, they've got you read through and through. Some of them will call you out on it. Some of them that have been broken down enough won't. But they will be the sweetest, most lovingest kids in the world. And
that is so interesting. That is so interesting, and that's the reason why I wanted to ask that question, because what I found is that, and I got a new word now for it from Country Boy. He said it was handy abled or handy ability. I guess it was something along those lines. I'm probably screwing it up, but basically,
capable.
what I said again. What is it?
Handy capable.
Handy capable. Okay, I like that. So basically, so the reason I asked that question is because what I found, being an educator, teaching people, seeing people from all walks of life, is that it seems when God gave, it seems like if we, and I'm probably putting this wrong, but I put it best I can right now, and that is when we see somebody that is handy capable, that, the media and everybody else call them handicapped. When God took something away, if we call that something being taken away, he really gave that person something to offset it. Mm-hmm. I had a brother that was 2 years older than me. He got hit by a train when he was 17, and at that time I was 15. He and I were living together. We were living with my brother. Him and his wife split. So we continued to stay there. He got a job, went to work, and we basically just stayed there and continued to go to school. But after he got hit by that train, he was the quiet one in the family. So what happened is he started speaking up more, but he would take a long time when you ask him a question, because he was basically thinking further down the line, because when he made decisions, he had to make decisions based on the fact that I am now in a wheelchair. I'm dependent on other people to do certain things for me. So let me give some thought. You would almost take a nap before he answers your question, but he's going to come back with the answer. And I just noticed that when he takes something away, he normally gives you something that would offset that. Have you noticed anything along those lines?
Oh, yeah. So I'll give you some examples of some big people that were on the spectrum. Beethoven, Mozart, Winston Churchill, Albert Einstein. If they were in the world we live in today, we would never have won World War II. We wouldn't have the music. And what's so cool about, Mozart and Beethoven is that their music, and there's been talks about fits that these guys have. They'd throw things, they'd get overwhelmed, and, those are meltdowns. That they were accepted because they were a genius in their field. And they have proven that their music actually, which is really cool, is the reason we have the frequency tones we do today, but also raises IQs and helps so many different ways. Not only makes you smarter, but a lot of these kids, they have gifts, but they're not given that opportunity to be able to express them, from having memories of elephants that never forget things to the coolest one I've seen yet is the fact that there was a 12-year-old, and a lot of these kids do not live in hypothetical worlds. They do not understand hypothetical worlds. They understand logic, but they understand one world that better than anybody, and they understand faith in God. And he started out when he was 6, and he actually it's about a 45-minute video where he actually uses the Big Bang Theory to explain why God exists in a logical, scientific format. These kids understand faith and God to a whole new level that we complicate it as regular people. Even my own kids, For instance, the standard joke that's baffled scientists and is the standing argument: what came first, the chicken or the egg? No one knows, right? But if you read the beginning of Genesis says God created the fowl in the air, the beasts on the land. So theoretically, and my son loves this one because he always goes and says, "Duh, Mom, read it. It's right here. Fowl, birds. Birds came first. Snakes on the ground came first. Eggs came second. Creatures came first." And then he'll get into his little rant about, space. And one of the reasons why a lot of these kids are obsessed with space, and it's really kind of cool, is the fact that in the Bible it actually states God created the heavens and the earth. And my son explained it to me. He goes, "Mom, God's not in our heaven. He's not in our solar system. We have to look beyond our own systems to another system, to another heaven, to find God. Because it says he created more than one."
Wow, you preaching now, girl. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you very much for answering my question.
Oh, Lord, I love it. I'm glad you asked, Charles. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Mary.
And that's the thing with these kids is that, they understand things at a different level. And when they're given that opportunity to shine and encouraged to shine from music, I mean, some of these kids has that perfect pitch. And they'll tell you suck. To being able to pick up any instrument and playing it, to being able to read and write and build things at such a young, phenomenal age and understand complex things. And that's the thing is each kid has their own gift that's allowing them to figure out what that is and using that to their benefit.
And Charles, that's what you were asking. This is Rick. That's what you were asking, how, if something is missing in one area, that it's compensated for in another area in these unique gifts. And one of the challenges is finding out what that gift is, what that superpower is, for that individual. And that's interesting when you look at it from that perspective. You may not have this, but you have a superpower in another area. And let's find out what that is. And of course, in understanding that, it gives them confidence. It gives them a feeling of usefulness. It gives them a feeling of contribution. And that's what happened with Einstein and these other Mozart. They found that gift of how they could actually contribute to society, with that unique gift. Mary, how old is your son?
8.
He's 8, and that's the important reason I asked that question based on what she was sharing. It's in the Bible, duh. He created the creature. The creature came before the egg. I learned something today, right? And so, as my understanding has been expanded, I should say, today. And so, Mary, hats off to you. The biggest key is education, and in a society that's not willing to accept people who are different, and is not willing to change. So,
and the thing is,
but with it,
here's the flip side of that: we're willing to accept. The weirder you are, the unlabeled you are, we accept you. We have the furry population of kids decided they want to pee in a litter box and eat out of a dog dish. That's okay. That's great. But if we have a label with an actual ability or a gift, we don't accept you because you don't look different. And that's the big part. It's all about how you look on the outside is how we judge you.
Right. And I think that's kind of interesting that you guys are, Rick, especially you bringing it up the way you did, because I was listening to something the other day, and they were talking about how mainstream media, as you know, we all are programmed, have programmed kids to accept the Ninja Turtles or the reptile type things or the superhumans that are not even human, Superman, Batman, call them whatever you want to, right? The Hulk. We are more likely to accept them who are not much human than we are those that are like 98% the same as we are. There's just very few things that differentiates the difference between us human beings, because when you take away the color, I'm sorry, if I cut either one of you guys, you're going to believe the same thing, you know. Mm-hmm. And one thing for sure is that, we all go through this life experiencing a lot of the same things, but we have differences. And what those differences are, if we were to find out what our superpower is, because I truly believe that, as Country Boys say, we were put on this planet to do something the way we do it, unlike anybody else can do it. That's why we are different in that sense, because nobody else can do it, the way that somebody else can do it. They can do it close, but not the same. And it ain't really what you do. That's a lot of talk radio hosts, a lot of athletes, a lot of all of us, right? But the question is, how do they do what they do? That's what differentiates the difference, and I just use something really simple. That differentiates LeBron James from all the other hundreds of basketball players out there. He do what he do a whole different way than everybody else does it. But they're doing it and successful as well. But anyway, sorry, I got
a really quick thought. Rick says superpowers. Superman was his hidden gift, not something he learned, In reality, if the truth was real told, he was actually Clark Kent. He was Clark Kent to everybody that knew him until he transferred into his superpowers, and that made him Superman.
See, the big reason why these kids struggle so much is that, we're taught from a very young age a hierarchy. So parents, teachers, professionals, any adult is up high. Kids are down on the bottom. And the problem is these kids don't think like that because their brains are at an adult wavelength. The coolest thing is they've just come out with a study that there's a buildup of lactic acid in their brains, which means their brains are always processing. Their brains are always working. And so these kids don't filter as much because they don't look at an adult as an adult. They look at them as an equal. And so they don't think twice about correcting an adult that you spelled something wrong, you said this wrong, the fact is wrong. And so the easiest way to deal with these kids to make them make them passive.
Well, that sounds like a people. That sounds like a people group. But that's a way that society does in general. Is to make them passive. Is to emasculate. Is to all of those things. One of the things that's really interesting when you're talking about this, and this is one of the things when I come back to, in my ministry, marketplace ministry, starting point, with, of course, spiritual business. It always kind of falls back to the spiritual, and the starting point is purpose and understanding your purpose. Why were you born? What unique gifts and talents, and doing that inventory and doing that assessment of gifts and talents that you were given based on your purpose as a starting point. Whether you be on the spectrum, whether you be, no matter who you are. I believe that that's the starting point for all of it. Because the more you can understand you, well, you have to start with you before you start figuring out anybody else. And I believe if a person is able to, think just the basics, where they can understand and comprehend, here's your purpose. LeBron James is great, because he understood his purpose before people did, before anybody else did. You know, he understood. He wanted to play basketball way back when, so he processed that whole thing a little bit different. Anybody who's great, they understood why they were born. You know, us all to some degree understood why we were born. That's why we're talking on this call. You know, that's why we are leaders in particular fields. We've been doing this for a long time. You know, people are just waking up. Just, you know, we're showing them, okay, hey, you can go this way in business and in life. But I believe it with everything that it starts with purpose and understanding your calling and understanding the unique gifts, talents, and skills that go along with that calling. From a spiritual perspective, that allows me to walk in spiritual authority. That gives me a base. It gives me a foundation from which to start. And I believe no matter who you are, if you're on the spectrum, if you're not, and it will be interesting as a study, you know, for folks that are quote unquote on the spectrum, to be able to say, okay, let's talk about purpose and why you were born. They probably understand that way beyond what we even understand it to be. Let's talk about, you know, what are some of the gifts that you feel that you have? And here's what I observed. What do you think? Man, that would be some serious information right there. But starting with that as a foundation, I believe that's the starting point. Because I know that's also the starting point, you know, in marketplace ministry, you know, where people, they cut my grass out here, Mary.
Keep rubbing in.
I live on a military base. The guy's cutting my grass.
We are in the lap. You're living in the lap of luxury as a government employee.
Anyhow, but to be able to start at that place, I know me in marketplace ministry, you know, a lot of times we look at business excellence and forget the spiritual piece to it, and folks burn out just from understanding the business side of it. But when they're given, you know, the foundation of here's why you're doing what you're doing. Here's your purpose. Here's your calling.
I'm going to quote you, Rick, on what we talk about a lot off the air, is a lot of businesses we forget. We follow the money. And that's where you struggle and don't succeed. And that's where you got to remember to always follow the mission. It's when you follow the mission and the why or the what that caused you to start your business.
How do you relate that to now the conversation we're having here with neurodivergent spectrum?
So the mission. So the big thing is when I work with veterans and stuff trying to transition into civilian world, is science has proven that when you look back at the ages of 10 to 14, and what did you want to be when you grew up? At that age gives you the focus of your career path, because you're still young enough to have the imagination that you can achieve anything, but yet you have the sense of reality to know that you can't be a superhero. And so you're looking at that level, and you're looking at taking what you like to do and flipping that to something you can accomplish in the civilian world. And these kids, if you actually sit down and listen to them, they will tell you what their mission is in life. You know, my daughter, for instance, her mission, her purpose is literally to make the world a better place. She believes that everybody is kind and that bad people need more love. And so her whole goal, and to this even now, no matter how much it drives mom nuts sometimes, is to be helpful and to help everybody out. And so we're going to flip that into a career path for her somewhere down the road as she gets older. But she helped create a program that's in her schools called the Kindness Club. And it teaches kids how to be kind to each other, but also to be kind to yourself. Because these kids struggle with that.
You gave her that, though. You gave her that foundation. You gave your son that foundation. If that foundation could be given to others, you know, that have the 66% that have the suicidal thoughts, I can almost guarantee they don't understand what you just said. the 25 that commit suicide, I guarantee you they don't understand what you just said. That is an antidote to what society is trying to put them in the box. You look at, like you said, Einstein and Mozart, their gifts were actually received by society, not because society, they just forced it down our throat, and we had to stop and say, hey, that's genius. The kindness campaign, that your daughter launched, that Captain Lynn Kane picked up on and is promoting, that was something that she gave, and so I'm just trying to think about how does this transition to society in whole, starting with a child who understands purpose. How does that get out?
The biggest start is when you're in the good example was you, Rick, when you went to the hotel that one day. Is that, you had that kid walking, the thud, 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 thud across the hotel floor all night long. That is a kid that regulates. That is, their pacing, which I'm hearing my son do right now, means I know where he is. To a parent with kids like that, to them, they know where their kid is. They know they're safe in that hotel room. But to the person below them, which, by the way, Rick, when we go on the cruise, we're on the bottom floor. So you won't hear David go thud, 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 thud all night. But, you did complain to the manager. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't complain because I learned from you that it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm hearing thud, 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 and I learned from you that it's not just an unruly kid, that it's probably someone regulating. And the parents are glad because they know their child is safe. So that education was great for me. So I didn't complain.
You see a kid having a meltdown in the grocery store, don't open your mouth and say, what a spoiled, rotten little brat. So many people forget, and this is my biggest thing, is that if you have nothing nice to say at that moment, especially in the earshot of a child, just don't say it. You know how many times my kids have heard the comments that, he's a spoiled, rotten little brat or things like that because he's overwhelmed at the grocery store.
You know what? I'll say this. I'm going to cut you off, but I wanted to say before we close the show, what you're doing, having the show, 4-spectrum, bi-spectrum, I think, to provide a safe place for people to come and to get information and to share. Those answers are not going to come from outside. It's going to come from, like with any community, whether it's African American, any community, those answers have to come from inside that community and not wait for something outside to happen for them. And so you guys doing this show, I think that is awesome because you're going to spark something. And I think you're going to spark community that rises up and understands and then communicates and defines who we are, as opposed to society defining who we are. I'll guarantee you that was it Governor Walz with the young man with the son? I bet based on society, was shamed. I bet he was shamed, and so they, because that's a general. It's the high.
You know what though? He wasn't. They did at first because no one knew his son had a disorder. So they were going after him at first for child abuse because they saw him grab his son and pull him hard. But once he spoke out and said this is what the issue was, he was, people acknowledged it and it wasn't a big deal. Where he's getting shamed once again is he's hiding it. He's not talking about it.
That's the general, though. Isn't that general in society? Not just him, but general in society. It's a shaming versus an understanding or education in general. I mean, what's the attitude in society in general?
The society in general is getting more open about it. It's the shaming parts are things like the people who are the conspiracy theorists that are preying off of the families that are desperate for answers. Honestly,
Mary,
thinking back to, like the Down syndrome in the 20s.
Right.
We got to get the parents to stop looking at these kids like they're broken and stop using or stop with these therapies that we deem the go-to therapies and stop listening to all these people. And it's more the professionals that have a lot of skin in the game. And, I've gotten a lot of slack at first. Parents or people made comments in the store. Once I explained the situation, they're like, oh, okay. Their perspective changed. It's the fact that we got to stop hiding in the corners and locking our kids in closets and get out there and talk about it. It's okay.
Mary, just to inject right there again, it's a conspiracy that you can't just sweep it under the rug. You can't just set it over in the corner. It's bigger than Watergate, a conspiracy. It's a hope gate to keep us blind. Bob Marley says we're prisoners locked up in our own minds using ignorance. The root word of ignorance is ignore. We can no longer ignore that they've been misusing and misabusing the children that they don't understand. So, Mary, high five again too, sweetie, because you are that advocate, not just for your state, but for the world now, that we can open up new eyes and let them see what's been going on. So continue, Mary, to do what you're doing, sweetie. We got your back.
Amen.
Hello, Mary. Hello, Mary. This is Len Kane of the Golden Rule Society Charity. I was notified that you have been selected as the hometown hero. You earned it, you deserve it, and God bless you now and always, and continued success in all you do. You being a senior advisor to the Golden Rule Society Charity means everything. God bless you now and yours forevermore. Thank you very much for letting me say congratulations. You well deserve it. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. How are you doing, sir?
Busy, but please press on. I didn't interrupt, but I just want to let you know and everybody else know we're going to tell the world about wonderful things you're doing.
Thank you, sir. It's always an honor to talk to you, sir. As we wind down the clock and the show comes to an end today, remember this week is the Patriotic Week. But instead of a moment of silence, have a moment of reflection and remember back to those events in the sense of what can you do to help somebody else? How can you uplift somebody today instead of tearing them down? We used to have the saying that sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will not hurt me. In reality, names and words last forever. And it's very hard to overcome. And in this society, these kids get talked about like they're not there, even though they're right there in front of us. So just because someone may not speak doesn't mean they don't hear. Doesn't mean they don't see. And these children lived in a world that's inhumane, honestly speaking. Because a lot of therapies, a lot of treatments designed for these kids would have been considered child abuse to a normal child. So remember, when you see a kid, before you open your mouth and react, think and give them words of encouragement. Because you don't know if your comment is the last comment they hear before they snap. In this day and age, we have young kids that have never been heard of before that are committing such violent crimes due to the stresses of their environment and to the reactions of society, and among many, many other issues. We are in a mental health crisis among our young youth. We're not giving them the tools. We are failing a whole generation of kids by not giving them the tools to deal with the society. And we need to stop and think about what we're doing wrong as adults, how we're not reacting properly, and how we're not helping guide them. And forgetting that these kids are kids. We need to let them be kids and stop pushing them into adulthood from a very young age, because their brains are not ready to handle all of what society has to give them. We need to protect them and keep them in a safe space as long as possible, and not make them grow up before their time. Because we need to be able to have these kids for the next generation. And we need to encourage and uplift, not put down and criticize. We need to be proactive, not reactive. Because when you look at it and look back, there are so many warning signs out there in so many different areas, so many people calling for help, that help's not available. And we got to wonder what we're doing wrong as adults to make it so that these kids are not, one, need the help and not being a child, but two, what are we doing wrong and not giving them the help they need and actually listening to them and treating them like kids. So any last comments before we close the show out for today?
Yeah, this is Charlie. I got one thing because this is really interesting because, you know, it's about people. I don't get into a lot of numbers. I get into people. But I think about what Rick said earlier about purpose, because, I mean, when it's all said and done, part of my spiritual awakening is the fact that we all was put here for a purpose, and we all were given, quote unquote, a superpower or the tools to fulfill that purpose. Otherwise, you know, God said it, I'll never leave you nor forsake you, right? So he had to give us what we needed in order to fulfill that purpose. Otherwise, he basically gave us a world of spectators and participators. And I think that everybody was put here to participate, not just to spectate. So the reason I brought that up is because the curriculum for the autistic group that we're talking about has already been created, and it was created years ago when they knew what they knew about autism at that time. Well, a lot more has been learned, but I guarantee you, with little knowledge I have of it, they still got that basic foundation of what they started with, and what we probably need is a re-education of those folks that are teaching or building the curriculum to teach autistic kids, because they have a purpose, and we have to kind of put the thing in reverse order, you know, and start focusing on it in a different way. How do we focus on it? You know, figure out some way to find out what their purpose is, and that will be at least a start. I hand it back over.
No, I have one little 10-second one because everybody knows about the 23rd Psalms. But if you fast forward to the end of the story, and he leadeth us in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. So Rick and I always like to say, when is the last time that the Almighty Divine Creator lied to us? So it's not just about us, and we already said that God loves all the little children, but he's not going to fail us. He's been looking for a generation that he can raise up. We always say that many are called and few are chosen. Mary, you have ran head-on collision with your life purpose, baby, to open up the eyes of not just your state, not just your governor, but for the world to see it's not just about us, but it's about his name's sake. And he is a provider, and our God has never run out on paying child support.
Exactly. So tomorrow is Travel Tuesday. It's all about health, wealth, and enjoying vacations, but also how to use your vacations as a mental health retreat and reset yourself and enjoy life. At the same time, helping create residual income and also regular income for yourself.
That sounds exciting. I think I'm going to get on the show.
I hope so.
I'll be there.
You'll be there. And one of the things we will talk about a little bit is how a lot of programs have come up for travel since 9/11, such as the freedom flights that allow veterans to go back to different battles and things like that for free to help them close that chapter.
And how travel has changed since 9/11, before and after.
That is true. One thing I do miss about traveling out in uniform compared to out of uniform is that I didn't have to take my shoes off.
Yep. It's true.
And we didn't have to wait in line. It's a whole new world traveling as a civilian, I gotta say. So have a good day, have a good night, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at noon Eastern. So bye for now.
All right. We'll see you. See you, Ron.
All right. Thanks for making part of it. Appreciate it.
Good day, everybody.